My name's Leon Hendricks. I'm the Managing Director of DLK. Thank you for attending this, hopefully to be good insight, information sharing webinar. We're going to keep it informal and interactive. So we've got about an hour, which includes all of those things in terms of sharing. So hopefully everybody will get something out of this webinar. Those that are on board at the moment or online. I'm going to hand over to Kashif now, who's going to open up and share with us the topics that we're going to cover, and then we'll go over to Etienne. Thanks.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome to today's session, Unlocking Organizational Excellence with a Process-First Mindset. My name is Kashif, and I'll be guiding you through the first part of the session before handing over to my colleague Etienne for a deeper dive. Just want to get the presentation going, and then we can get started. Dale, if you can confirm that you can see my screen.
Yes, I can see your screen.
Okay, awesome. So today we're talking about something deceptively simple, but deeply transformative as well. Putting process before projects, tools, or even strategy execution. We've seen time and time again, when teams lack process clarity, chaos creeps in. But when organizations define how work gets done, everything else, agility, performance, even innovation starts to fall into place. I'm going to share with everyone a few stories about how a process-first approach has helped organizations in different industries. Let's start with a familiar scene, a major retail group sitting around a board table, reviewing another round of delayed project reports. Sales targets were climbing, the market was ripe, but internally, things weren't moving. Everyone was busy, late nights, endless meetings, yet when they looked closer, they found a real issue. Different teams were working off different assumptions. Ownership was blurred. Decisions were reactive. So they made a bold move to shift to a process-first approach. And they mapped out workflows, defined who owns what, and the impact. Project delivery accelerated and costs dropped by 12%. A key takeaway, when you define the process first, you control the outcome instead of reacting to the chaos. So Etienne, I've got a question here. Have you ever seen great talent and effort wasted because teams weren't aligned?
Yeah, many times.
How many times? Like, that's almost like a cliche, right?
Look,
like,
I
it
mean,
happens so many times. It's like part of just like every day. How do we deal with this?
Yeah, so if you go look at my profile, I mean, I work with these big corporates, the Woolworths, the Santums, and all of those places, and I've seen many projects actually done twice. That includes external consultants, the PwCs, the Deloittes, all of those. You know, they quite like it because then you can keep billing. But so yeah, I've actually seen fewer projects successfully done from day one than ones that got hiccups in my life.
Even with the best of planning, right?
Yeah, the best projects that I've seen is actually not in the corporate industry. It's actually outside in construction and things like that, where they do follow some sort of a process, and it actually turns out better at the end of the day.
I'm just imagining, imagine we made the invisible bottlenecks visible before it actually hurt anybody. Like, imagine that sort of value,
I'll use one example, which is now history, and hopefully I can't be held liable for that, because in the old days, there was a thing called Sanlam Health. Before that, it was Santam. And then Santam wanted to follow a new business model. The guys went overseas. They thought they could grab this American concept, software, everything, bring it in. Long story short, there's no SunMed anymore. There's no more Sanlam Health. The business closed. Yep. I was part of that. Not of the decision making, but I was one of the ones that was in the firing line.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Anyway, that's it. Real example.
Painful example. Okay. I'm going to move on to the next. If I can get my mouse to work with me here. There we go. Okay. So this story goes like this. High turnover was the problem for a large financial services firm. At first glance, they thought it was all about compensation. But digging deeper, they discovered the root cause: process confusion. People didn't know what success looked like in their roles. Their expectations were murky. But by clarifying the workflows and setting clear expectations and standardizing how work flowed between the teams, staff turnover dropped by 22%. And engagement, well, that soared. The important thing that you highlighted there is that a process-first approach is so important.
Yeah, even to an abstract thing like a unit trust, I
mean, absolutely. And it's sad when individuals can't see the importance of that. And like you say, leadership changes. Some people want to just leave their legacy in whatever way, shape, and form. And it's not necessarily the best approach to take.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay. Mindful of time, I know that we want to get to the deep dive, so I'm going to go through a few more stories and examples of where a process-first approach has actually been successful. So on the slide that I have up, the next one deals with risk. So if we have anyone in the audience that is in the risk area of their business, I'm sure they'll resonate with this. Most organizations manage risk by adding more layers, and I've been one of them, having worked in one of the big banks in the risk area, and discussions with the auditors inevitably results in more and more reports, more approvals. But at a logistics company we worked with, the CRO took a different route. They started reacting to incidents and started designing risk prevention into everyday workflow. They embedded the checkpoints where it mattered most in the work and in the flow of that work itself. And the result, risk incidents dropped by 30%. The lesson here, proactive risk management starts by designing smarter processes, not by piling on after the fact. What's your thoughts on that, Etienne?
No, I can't agree more. So I'm the wrong one to ask, but yes, it makes perfect sense. I mean, risk, the ultimate thing that you want to do with risk is to prevent risk. So to prevent risk, I mean, I make it a very simple thing. I have a private hobby, which causes a lot of money on my side, wasted money if the project goes south. And it's all to do with designing and building funny rooftop tents. And it's a lot of aluminium and canvas stuff that's in this. Now, you can imagine from a quality and risk point of view, I've seen many times where it's a simple example now, but, when the drawing is wrong, the CNC part is manufactured, you have to pay for all of those and you sit with the waste. So, if the process was done properly, the risk would be mitigated. Now, this is a stupid example, but this is exactly the same in business. for any organization. So yeah, I agree.
I've seen time and time again when technology implementations fail because like the underlying workings weren't reimagined first. And you can't just take a tech solution and plunk it into an organization. It doesn't always work properly. There's so many things that you need to check.
Yeah, maybe another practical example. We'll check the time and we'll make it up. But I was busy with a project now at a retailer, and it's all about merchandise management. And one of the processes was about data management and setting up and configuring the systems. And in the beginning, it was a thought around some of the people in the room that that's not a process. That's a back-end data thing. Then I actually did design the configuring the merchandise management application as a process with all the administrators and whatever there is. So now when you open up a store, it's not just the physical store, it's all the back-end stuff that also needs to be in place before you can actually unlock. So yeah, absolutely. I'll keep quiet now. We've got to move on.
Thanks.
All right. The digital transformation stall. I've got my titles here that I'm hoping is going to spark some thoughts with individuals in the audience. Okay, so this is about a different organization that invested millions in the latest digital tools. And as we've seen time and time again, in this case also, adoption was slow and ROI was disappointing. So when they reviewed the situation, they found that tech wasn't the issue. The processes were. People didn't know how the tools aligned with their day-to-day workflows. So they stepped back and they mapped and realigned and made sure that all of their processes were aligned first. And adoption took off, and so did ROI. In this example, technology succeeds when it supports great processes, not when it tries to fix broken ones. And like I said, Etienne, there's so many tech implementations that I've seen fail because it's not just about the technology. No, it's about the processes as well.
Because the perception is that tech is the silver bullet, that ERP will solve everything.
Exactly. But when there are problems, in my space, looking at data and BI, a lot of the times I keep telling stakeholders that the tool's going to highlight the issues in the data. The tool's going to highlight the issues if there are broken processes. Yeah. It's not going to be solving everything as much as they want to move towards, for example, a data-driven organization. It's going to highlight things, and you're going to have to make decisions based on whether things are looking good or when things are looking bad.
Yeah.
Cool. Moving along. The project portfolio dilemma. Sounds dramatic, eh? At a large project management organization, they had a large PMO with quite a few project managers there. But too many projects meant teams were spread thin. They were stuck in firefighting mode. By taking a process-first approach lens to this portfolio, they could clearly see where work was adding value and where it wasn't. So they prioritized based on project impact, not just urgency. And as a result, success rates rose by 40% and strategic execution accelerated. The key takeaway here, and something I remember vividly, is the process-first approach, rather, in this particular project management office shifted from chaos to clarity, and aligning delivery to the strategy was just amazing. So, Etienne, I'm gonna end it there. We've seen how a process-first mindset can deliver real measurable results across staff turnover, risk, technology, and delivery. But what does it take to build this mindset into your delivery models, especially for large-scale systems like ERP? So I'm hoping we can explore that in the slides that you're going to be covering now in the deep dive. So I'm going to hand over to you, and then I'll join again after your deep dive.
Yeah, and just if anybody has got a question that they want to pop in the Q&A, just ask it and we'll see if we can respond to it. Okay. So yeah, next slide for me then, please.
There we go.
Right. So this is, you've actually given a very good intro to this. I might as well sit back now and just bat questions, but let's go on. So let's go to the next slide, please. All right, so you've touched on these stories, and I think this is just a nice summary. If you just maybe glance at the ones on the right-hand side of the slide with Lidl and Target and Spar in South Africa, just look at the numbers there in red, and you'll see a lot of money and time and effort wasted. And I think the one that's not quantified on the slides is the fatigue that this sort of causes to the employees on the floor. It's sometimes, I've seen this in my own experience in the coffee shops and the breakaway rooms. The guys talk and it's like they have no confidence in management because of all this nonsense that they're doing. So that has a big impact on the morale and the employee engagement at the end of the day. So we can step on to the next slide. So that was just a summary. I think this slide here is, if you understand this slide, this is like the $1 million slide. If you get this slide, we can actually, stop. But I will unpack this a little bit more detail. So this topic, I just want to be clear, this is not a lecture. This is just a discussion for us to understand this thing. But the concept of a process-first approach and the relationship to agile requirements or agile delivery, at the end of the day, if you think about it, doesn't really matter whether you're private sector or not. It is features or things that you want to implement to make the job more effective for people executing to deliver your products and services. So with this now, everybody understands or have heard of Agile, but this is just a practical way to show you how Agile requirements management fits in or plugs into a process structure. So what you see on the slide here is, let's drop down to the level 3 process. There you've got a process called convert leads to sales. Now, that is just an example of a process. So if you have your process catalog, you will have different processes in your business. But just bear with me with the example. Now, that relates to what we would call an epic in the Agile environment. Now, an epic can break down into what we call features. Now, features is something that can actually be used when you click something on a screen or you do something on a computer. It actually does something for you useful. And a lot of application tasks roll up into one particular feature. But here you can see the activities represent the features. So here I've got a feature, for instance, to create a quote. So you can see now that feature has got many user stories or requirements. One example here now is, as a sales representative, because that's indicated by the role on the lane there, I want to create multiple quote options and display them in a table format so that customers can easily compare and choose the best option for their needs. So that's a typical requirement that a business user has. That's why it's called a user story. It's linked to the feature of creating a quote, linked to the sales process. All right, so there you get your traceability. Now, during the project cycle, you don't go and design all these requirements to the infinite degree with screen designs and whatever. You don't do that up front. That happens later when that user story is part of maybe a sprint. But anyway, what you see on the screen is the user story breaks down then into user story tasks. And it could vary from user story to user story, but you can see examples. So it's designing the user interface, it's maybe the data model, it's the back-end development, front-end development, security, testing, and so forth. So this is just the idea, because the rest of the story I'm going to tell plugs back into this, how a process-first approach really realizes this. It's actually understanding your business. It's giving you clarity of how your business works. And the test here is quite easy. If you go to your business and you go to an individual on the floor, and you can ask them to show me or show you what their job entails and how they do their job. Very few of them will probably be able to do that. They will tell you what they're doing, but it will differ from role to role or individual to individual. So it's not really a clearly defined environment of working. All right. Not a long story, because can you go to the next slide, please? So you want to plug this into a cycle. And what I've done here is to map it into a more agile approach. And it fits perfectly well with this sort of framework. So what you see here is the end-to-end view. We'll go into the different phases of initiate, construction, transition, and operate now. But here you can see that it's the process with its features, with its user stories, that goes through the whole cycle to the end where you actually deliver a product increment. And for instance, in this particular case, the process was planned merchandise, but planned merchandise has got many things in it. But once you've done all those features and you've actually user tested it, and you've done all the training material, and you've trained people, and you've deployed it, and people are using it, you've actually achieved your end result and your goal. So we'll go through these phases now. So next slide, please. Right, so starting off with any project, it's good to start with the end in mind. So, I mean, that makes perfect business sense. So a typical vision statement. I'm not going to read through all these goals, but you have things like strategic goals, operational goals, your financial goals, and your technical goals. So these are all goals, and they always very well documented in most cases, and they sit somewhere on the PMO's portfolio, and they're there. So that's the one thing that I think most projects do very well, is doing these things. However, so you'll see on the next slide, the thing that's in most cases missing, and if it's working in your business, I apologize. I'm talking about my experience with companies that I have worked with. This piece is missing. So you've got this very nice vision statement, but now which areas of the business is touched or impacted? First of all, in most cases, companies don't have a catalog of all their processes. So that's the one problem, and I'll talk about that a little bit later as well, or maybe address it now. You don't have to have a complete catalog before you can start the project. No, you can build the catalog when you start the project. I'm going to use this time to use this example as well. I was also asked by a large retailer to come and help them with the supply chain scoping of a project. They had asked many of these big five consultants to help them. And yes, the price ticket was very high and the duration was very long. And then they asked me for a proposal. The only reason they asked me for a proposal, somebody on the team knew me and have worked with me in the Woolworths environment. And so I was asked to do this thing. So I was very naive. I went to the meeting. I looked at the problem and I said, well, we can do this in 1 week. We can scope the whole supply chain in 1 week. And then I put a cost to it. And I was called in again because I was told that it's crazy because the price is by far too low and the duration of the time is much too short. Long story short, I did convince the team that I could do it. And yes, we did do it in 1 week. So that is actually used as we speak today as well. The team is actually today, 4 years later, still busy with this enhancing. So that's something you can do. So I think this is probably the most important aspect of this whole philosophy, or let's call it methodology or framework, is the ability when you have a project. You talked about the project portfolio earlier on. So if you can imagine, if the PMO has got a list in a database of all his or her projects, but also understanding which processes are impacted, therefore, which processes are shared between projects, because the process scope not only gives you the process, it also gives you the process owners. If it's maintained and well maintained, it will give you the current roles. It will give you the current applications that are being used. It can even go as far as the current skill sets. It can even go as deep as telling you the gaps on skills of people. So you know, and your policies and regulations and risks and all of those things. So when you actually have those bubbles, you see on the right-hand side a few processes there. This is just an example of 17 processes which are in scope. And for the purpose of this discussion, it's not a complete merchandise management scope. This is just to use this for the webinar. But you have a magnitude of information by doing this from day one. So you understand now how things are connected. It gives you insight into how your business works to produce a key capability in the company. You can go on, or is there a question? On. All right, next slide. All right, so we touched about defining the in-scope process. Hopefully that was clear. And yes, now I think a lot of you will be thinking, this is waterfall. Now you've got all these processes and you're going to go and design all these processes. That's going to take years before we can actually write one line of code. No, it's not what you do. You prioritize your processes. You understand which processes is important for you. It might actually be the one that's not customer facing that you want to do first, because it's going to feed the data to all the other processes. Anyway, so you rank your processes by having obviously workshops with that, and you have an idea of how your processes are going to be structured. So then for the one or two processes that come up high in the ranking, for those, you go and design the activities, the one you see on the right-hand side there. So I've got the develop sourcing strategies. So now I go deeper and I say, okay, that particular process has got 7 activities and so many roles associated to it, current systems, policies, regulations, and so forth associated. So now you've got an idea how that process is supposed to be working to realize that particular area. If you were now going to evaluate ERP software, or you've actually made the decision already, you can use this now to say, okay, where do we have to configure, or where do we have to add things? With other words, new code and so forth. So that area is important, but don't understand me wrong that you have to go and, let's say you've got the one project I'm working on now had 168 processes. You can't go and do 168 processes. You'll be forever busy, but you will do the one that is in scope and you will complete it and then go on. So then we can go to the next slide. So now once you've got that in-scope process, which we did now, you can go a bit deeper. Now you can say, all right, let's understand what are the current gaps on this process. With other words, where do we want to have new technological solutions to come and assist us? Where does it work well? Where doesn't it work? Or do we want to actually completely change this thing, because it might be that this is still running on a complete old mainframe and we want this now to be running in a cloud-based application or whatever it is. But what you can see now is you now on the right-hand side, you start identifying your user stories, and the user stories, they are associated to those activities on the process. So now you've got traceability between your user story, and the word user is important because you know where the users are now as well. So that might be that you've got one user against the thing here in terms of who's raised the requirement, but that user in that team, there might be 10 or 20 or 50 of them. So you're representing the user in that particular space. So that user requirement or the user story is associated to the feature, which is the activity, which is linked to the epic, which is the process. All right. So now you're ready to go into the next phase from initiate, we can now go into the next phase. Shift, next slide, please. So here, I've only got the one slide to explain it. And also from a timing point of view, it'll make sense. But during the construction phase, you take that process now, and that process now has got its features and it's got its user stories. So you can see the little picture there. You've got the epic, the features, and you've got your sprint backlogs now. So now you can break this thing up into, say, how many sprints do we need to complete all these features? You plan that and you execute that. And during this execution phase here, it's the things like, you know, when the team, it's obviously the development or the coding of this thing, but it's also the unit testing. It is also identifying your acceptance criteria, which you will start using later on in testing and so forth. So there's quite a few things that happen here. So this is where everybody on the team has got the ability to see what's happening. So they've got clarity. So you've got an iterative and focused delivery across the whole team. You're reducing waste because you're working on the stuff that actually is going to make business sense. And you've got enhanced collaboration because the developer, the tester, the business analyst, the end user, the business owner, all of them can see where their particular requirement is and where the progress of this thing sits. Also the change management guys. So they also have a heads up early on. All right, so next slide, please. So now we go to transition. So let's say on the slide there, you see a little number 7 there in terms of suggestions, which equates user stories. So those are the user stories associated to this particular process and related to certain of the activities. But here is where you will start doing end-to-end testing for each process. You'll train users by process and role, which means your training material, your work instructions, all sit against the process. It's not like you have a thing sitting there on SharePoint and somewhere over here, all over the show. You actually have your process, your work instructions, your training material, all connected to the process, as well as the requirements and the status of them. So the number 7 on top there shows that means there are still 7 that haven't been done yet. If there were no requirements on the top, there would have been nothing there. So all the requirements have been dealt with other words, so they've been implemented. So during the transition phase, you've got holistic validation, you've got smoother adoption, and you've got higher quality outcomes because, again, everybody has got clarity in terms of what you're actually delivering here. And I think one of the things for me that's the most important, like I said earlier on, right in the beginning about the Unit Trust project, the Unit Trust project is a very abstract thing. But once you break that thing up into what's actually happening in a Unit Trust, then you start visualizing how this thing actually works. And it brings everybody on board in terms of, the people who are going to work in the contact centers, the people who are going to process it, and so forth. Everybody sees the same thing and everybody understands it. The process is a common business language. It actually helps you to give clarity of what you're doing in the company. Right. Next slide. So during transition, as I also said, and I did iterate that, is the work instruction bit and the training materials. Here you can see from that same process, you've got one activity there now. That one activity is now not broken up. It contains, that's the word, the complete work instructions for this particular feature. It's got maybe a training material in there, like videos and whatever. So when an end user gets access to the process, and also ultimately one day when they use the system, they can actually link back to the way they were trained against the process and see how to do it with the work instructions connected to the activities, connected to the process. With other words, the feature that they actually are going to use, filling in screens, clicking here and doing things, it's now traceable back to their actual job. So that's your product increments that you deliver one after the other until you deliver the complete solution. All right, next slide, please. All right, so we've gone through the various phases now. And then you get into the last phase, which is the operate phase. Now, this phase is most important, probably the most important of all of them. Well, it's difficult to say. If the previous ones were not done properly, then your operation is going to be a disaster. But anyway, operation is, what I mean with that, as I said earlier, the guys at this retail company that I'm working with, they're still using the same stuff 4 years later. So, and it's going to be even more, it's maintained, so it changes, but it's the same base. So during operations is where you're sweating the assets. That's where this whole thing that you've created is now being used on a daily basis. The workforce changes, the guys go all over, they change jobs, you get new people in, you get new leadership in, and this is also an interesting story. Also a real story. We just had a onboarding of a new senior leader in this particular company, and the person was amazed that there was actually a catalog of processes with process definitions, with work instructions, explaining how this end-to-end environment functions. So much easier for that person as a leader to come in to say, okay, based on my experience, I can see gaps because you can visualize the gaps. You can see how the business is currently working, and you can make improvements or suggest improvements. All right, so during the operation phase, you ensure process adoption. That's a small word for a big thing. We all know this is where technological projects die. My voice, that's when they get killed. People don't like this new thing. It's because they haven't been part of the journey all the way. The way I explained it now, hopefully, you've seen that as a role where you are involved in, you can be part of this journey from inception to end. And you can see even in your small little world where you are contributing, what they're doing and what's going to happen, and you know what the impact is. So ensure process adoption. During operations, you monitor the system health and you want to understand what's working, what's not working. You collect process metrics. With other words, it might actually be performing worse than what you thought it would be, or it might actually be performing better, but you get the metrics now. And then from here, you start identifying new gaps, which you want to close with user stories and requirements, and you continue the cycle. So what does it mean as an impact? It's continuous improvement, but not just continuous improvement when we initiate a project. It's continuous improvement in operations. So you actually have your workforce now able to contribute on a daily basis to make improvement suggestions. They can see what's happening with their suggestion. They can see if it is implemented. So people are now being, what's the word now? They are part of running the business. They're not sitting just there pushing buttons. So you have a better operational efficiency. And you've got stakeholder satisfaction, by maintaining a direct link between the solution and the business processes. So this approach drives higher satisfaction among stakeholders, as the solution delivers measurable business value. So to sum up, last slide for me is the overall business benefits is, business technology alignment, massively important, enhanced traceability and governance, agility with purpose. So, you're not just developing a bunch of features, you're actually developing features which you can trace back very easily to where it's actually being used in the business, and then reduce risk. So, yeah, Kashif, that was me. I don't know if there was any thoughts or anything on that.
Thanks, Etienne. I mean, that was a really powerful deep dive. Leon, I think you've got some comments from your side.
Yeah, it's more thanks, Etienne, and thanks, Kashif. More towards Etienne again, because Kashif brought up the whole impact, the takeaways. And that's always a big thing in any organization, big or small, and how is it measured, etc. And I know that organizations have brought in this agile approach based on, getting very quick impact and, to move ahead rather than the long process. Just from your side, Etienne, where would you think that measurable impact happens at all of those stages? Can it be measured? Impact already at an early stage, or does it at what level where it starts getting mature? I don't know if I'm making sense, what I'm asking around impact.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I've never actually measured it, in terms of a number to tell you it's improving like this. But what I can give you a tangible answer to that. Just give me a moment. But I think the first part of it is, if you just apply your mind, there's not one phase where it doesn't have a positive impact. So the phases follow on one another. So if you initiate incorrectly, you have the wrong scope. You have the scope is, if the scope is wrong, you're completely off track from day one. During construction, because you're working in maybe in sprints and in the Scrum environment, perhaps. Now the user stories is so tangible. The user story is actually for that guy sitting in front of his or her computer coding this stuff, understand where this thing fits back into the bigger picture, in terms of they can see the impact that they're doing with this thing that they're coding. But that's not just for them, it's also for the rest of that team. So the data analysts, the architects, all of those roles, they've got the impact is huge because they have, I don't know how to say this differently, but they've got clarity. They all have the same view of what is actually being built. And then obviously during the transition phase, massively important, and I think that's probably the one that a lot of work happens in many cases in isolation, because people don't have these good definitions of what needs to be done and how it's going to work. With other words, the process perspective. Now, once you have this in place now, it's so much easier for the change managers, the training guys, the back-end guys to understand the impact of this thing that they're doing. So, Leon, in all cases, it's a huge thing, but I want to show you. Yeah, just give me one second. I just want to give you a practical example here. I worked on a project last year.
No, happy. Yeah, I think it's, no, but it's fine. It's more around.
Okay.
I think you've answered the question more. I mean, the metrics. I'd probably what the cost would be of not following this process first approach.
But this is what I want to illustrate. Just give me 30 seconds. I was working on a project last year where I was part of the team. It was a really big team, and I'm not going to call any company or name here, but then an external vendor was appointed, not sitting in our country, sitting somewhere else, to build this new complicated thing. The project was canned after 4 months because there was nothing tangible to see. What are we changing? It's a lot of PowerPoint slides and sessions. We're sitting here now talking to one another. That's the same thing. These people sit in another time frame in another area. A lot of PowerPoints, and to be honest, a lot of bullshit. So at the end of the day, there was no tangible benefit of showing. And once I've illustrated that, again, if you had visibility of how this thing actually works as a process, everybody in the room can see, and everybody can see with the progress. And that thing got canned. The impact of this sort of thing is huge. I think the pity is that this doesn't feature in the boardroom or in the exco level. And I think it's because, yeah, I don't know. It's not taught at varsity, I guess. It's not taught at the management schools. It's such an obvious thing, and I'll keep quiet.
Yeah.
Etienne, I think you make a very important comment
You've answered
there.
my question.
When you're sitting in project meetings or project updates to various levels of leadership, when we're trying to talk about everybody getting on the same page, but some people are talking technology, others looking at things from a business perspective, it's difficult to do that. And what you've highlighted there in your deep dive is the process first approach allows all of those different kinds of stakeholders to come together to actually get onto that same page. And what I'm thinking more and more is the process first approach is not just the methodology, it's that mindset shift. The one that would anchor our most important business initiatives in clarity, control, and collaboration. And I like what you've mentioned in the deep dive. So I'm just going to recap a few of those tangible benefits that we've seen. Stronger alignment between business and delivery, which is so important. Improved traceability for audits and compliance. So we haven't mentioned any tools, but if you have the right tool in place, you should be able to lift all of those key details into what you need to report and present to the auditors to make them comfortable, and show all of the stakeholders as well that you're considering various aspects of the delivery as part of the process in achieving that. A clearer way of prioritizing and structuring the backlog and what feeds into the different sprints. An end-to-end validation of value and not just technical delivery. You mentioned continuous improvement, and that's so important as well. But when you're looking at a process-first approach, it's driven by how people actually work. And through all of this, it's stronger engagement across the organization, all the way from the executives down to the end users. So I think this is awesome. And from my side, this has just been so valuable, just listening to how you've gone through that deep dive. So if there's anything that's resonated with our audience, I'm going to ask and invite them to take the next step. And through a DLK group proof of concept, we can help you experience a process-first approach in action, starting with one or two of your main critical workflows. So from my side, I'd just like to thank my colleagues for their contribution to making this webinar successful. And most importantly, to our audience, thank you once again for taking time out of your busy diaries to be a part of today's session. Again, let's stay connected. Let's build better together. Etienne, comments from your side?
Yeah, maybe a last comment. This clarity thing, it's so important. This project I talked about earlier now, I was able, there was some of the leadership that had the thinking, or still has the thinking, that an ERP platform is going to solve all the problems. And it will solve a lot of the problems for sure. But then I was able to show them by number that 46% of their activities are done by human beings without any system support. So you can bring in this fancy ERP, but what are you going to do about the 46% of people that don't use the ERP? So you have to have a complete understanding of your business. And then you can go deeper. I could actually show also where is email used as a way of running the business, and Excel and stuff like that, where you can actually go, it's just clarity. You can, it's simple. You can't change if you can't see something.
So true.
Yeah. So for me, I'm the last one to ask, because I've been through this so many times. I will not start a business. I said earlier, I have this hobby where I build, design these tents, rooftop tents. I've got my own little business in Glue. This is a product. I've got my ordering process. I've got my communication with my suppliers. I run my own finances, but I've got it against my finance area. So I've got all my processes. It's not a lot of processes, but I got all my processes in my little business. Now, why should my business, because it's my money that comes from my bank account, be different to your business, where you've got deeper pockets? But at the end of the day,
exactly
it's the same
it,
principle.
Right?
Yeah.
That's exactly it. Whether it's a small business, a solopreneur in your case, or if it's a larger organization, it's the same issues. And what you've highlighted in terms of the process approach to things just makes everything more transparent.
Yeah, and as the last thing from my side, I really hope that if there's some people listening to this, that they do reach out so that we can have a discussion. The thing I wanted to say, this is not a complicated thing to implement, not at all. Yeah, I'll keep it there.
Leon, some closing remarks from your side?
Yeah, from my side, thank you to both of you for giving up your time and to present. And hopefully there was value to the audience. And if there are any questions, I hope there were some questions on the side. But if not, you didn't put down anything and you want to directly contact us or myself, if you know who I am or have my details, then do so. It's conversations cost nothing, literally just to kind of extend or just asking for further clarity on some of the things that are bothering you, whether you business own or just in your area of where you work, etc. Yeah, so that's my closing remarks. Thank you for making the time.
Pleasure.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.